Hello and welcome to Operation Rise Week 4. Today we're going to talk about Psalm 40 and how God thinks about you a lot. Psalm 40 begins like this. It's a psalm of David. I waited patiently for the Lord, and he inclined to me and heard my cry. He also brought me up out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and set my feet upon a rock and established my steps. He has put a new song in my mouth, praise to our God. Many will see it in fear and will trust in the Lord. The lovely part is that God's given David a new song. Has this ever happened to you? It happened to me. I went through a deep depression in 2005, 2006 when I despaired of ever being happy or useful again. But after that, the Lord gave me a new song and a new life in Oregon, where I looked forward to Africa. But I had other plans. But the fact that God gave me a new song once before was proof enough that I could trust him to do it again, and he did. But in Psalm 40, I am less enthused about the references to waiting patiently and the horrible pit thing. Waiting patiently in particular implies that it was uncomfortable. If something requires patience, you'd like to see it resolve sooner than what is actually happening. So what was this waiting process like? The reference to the horrible pit makes me think of Joseph, who was thrown into a literal pit by his brothers and then sold into slavery in Egypt. There are multiple ways you can end up in a pit. Number 1, you fall into the pit by accident. Number 2, you jump to the pit on purpose. Number 3, other people put you in the pit against your will. I want to emphasize that God can redeem all 3 scenarios, but today we're focusing on number 3, when you are put in a pit by other people. So, Joseph's brothers put him in the pit, and then bad things kept on happening to him. He got sold into slavery in Egypt. He got accused of rape by Potiphar's wife, thrown into prison, and then forgotten by his one upwardly mobile connection, Pharaoh's chief butler. So, Joseph's self-talk could have looked like this. Bad things keep happening to me. I shouldn't expect anything else. I must be invisible. I got forgotten again. What happened to me or happens to me does not matter because I don't matter. Joseph's life was so hard, no one would have blamed him for thinking that way. But the scriptures are almost eerily silent concerning his emotions. They don't tell us what he was feeling or thinking. They only tell us what Joseph does. So we know that number 1, he's an excellent worker who took on more and more responsibility. Number 2, he insisted on honoring God, and other people saw that God was with Joseph. And number 3, Joseph cared for others. Specifically, when Joseph got put in charge of other prisoners in Pharaoh's prison, he had the bandwidth to ask the two of them, why do you look so sad today? So this begs the question, where did he get the bandwidth to care for others? And I propose to you that it's because Joseph felt cared for himself. I know that sounds outrageous, but nothing else explains how Joseph not only survived, but was busy thriving in his appalling circumstances. At the end of the Joseph story, we do get external validation of Joseph's feelings from his brothers, of all people. It's after Joseph rises to power in Egypt and his brothers have come to get famine relief, and Joseph, unrecognized and speaking through an interpreter, deals harshly with them. And then they say to each other, not knowing that he could understand, we're being punished now because of what we did to our brother. We are guilty concerning our brother Joseph. We heard the anguish of his soul as he cried out to us, but we ignored him. And Joseph, upon hearing this, he turned his face away and wept. And honestly, this is the most powerful scene in the Joseph story to me. The first time I read it, I was like, well, thank the Lord, he shows some emotion. It takes you back to when he was just a kid yelling for help, and they did not care about the anguish of his soul. In fact, in a chilling detail, the scriptures say that they had thrown him into the pit, and then they sat down to eat a meal. But it's interesting that his brothers reference his emotions specifically at the end. Joseph eventually got external validation. I'm very, very sorry, dear one, but you may not. You may never hear an acknowledgement of harm done to you. In Joseph's case, regardless of his brother's admission of guilt, Joseph already trusted God's care for him. Look at these two verses. On the left, we have Joseph's brothers who said, "We heard the anguish of his soul." On the right, David talks about the Lord in Psalm 31, and we can say too, "You have seen my troubles, and you care about the anguish of my soul." And regardless of what English translation you're using, the word shown here as anguish is the same Hebrew word in both verses. So my question to you is, what has caused you to feel anguish? When have you felt anguish? And I challenge you to not gloss over the waiting patiently in the horrible pit phase, and then to rush on and quote platitudes about the new song you're anticipating. Yes, God will give you a new song in his own way, in his own time. But the Lord is not glossing over any part of your experience. Please do acknowledge your feelings directly to him. Back to Psalm 40. In verse 5, David says, "The thoughts God thinks about me are innumerable." And in Psalm 139, David says, "How precious are your thoughts to me, O God. If I were to try and count them, they'd be like the sand on the seashore." So when you think you're invisible and that everyone is ignoring what was done to you, so you must not really matter anyway, remember Joseph and all those years of patiently waiting, and think like Joseph did, that God is for you and you are on his mind.